We're moving to my second most enjoyable region. Probably, I mean, you think about the Shephelah and Esdraelon, and probably why they're most interesting to me and important to me is because of their strategic value. And the other thing really, I guess kind of is because they're so, still today, if you can get there, they're so natural. Like I say, there's no tourist shops in the Shephelah. There really aren't any tourist shops up in the Valley of Jezreel. Valleys and hills don't change over all these thousands of years. So the Shephelah looks the same today, essentially, as it did in the days of David and Samson. And the Esdraelon Valley looks essentially the same today as it did in the days of Solomon and Deborah and Barak and the ones who interacted there. I mean, you go to Jerusalem and it's a big city. I remember the first time in one of my trips, we drove from Jerusalem and we're heading down to Caesarea, and we get, we're on our way to Caesarea, and I look out the bus window, and of course there's houses and developments and everywhere, and I look out the bus window and I see a Home Depot. I was like, are you kidding me? Okay. Well, there's no Home Depot in the Shephelah yet, and there's no Home Depot in the Esdraelon Valley. And so you can go there and you just kind of put yourself back in biblical times. And maybe that's one of the reasons I love it so much. So let's go to the Valley of Jezreel and Esdraelon. We move from Judah north to kind of that dividing line at the Benjamin Plateau, Ramah Mizpah. Now we're in Israel, the northern tribes, the capital at Shechem, and then Tirzah, and then around to Samaria. The Dothan Pass is leading up into the heart of the Valley of Jezreel, and let's go up into Jezreel and let's get a perspective on what's going on there as God is sculpting this part of the world very specifically to accomplish purposes that not only tie to biblical history, but what? To biblical eschatology, to the future. The battle of Megiddo. Har is mountain, Megiddo is the pass where everybody's traveling, and someday a great battle is going to take place there again in the days of Jesus, and that's pretty moving to think about, and I'll say more about that in a moment. Here we are. The Valley of Jezreel, or Esdraelon, I'll get to the notes in a minute, running northwest to southeast and defining very much the travel of all of the ancient world from Egypt to the rest of the world and the rest of the world to Egypt. Here it is on our satellite image. And this is an interesting topographical map kind of thing that you will see if you're ever able to go to Megiddo. There's a beautiful national park there, a fantastic little museum, and this is in the museum. And I'm glad I got a shot of this because they built kind of a topographical model of the Jezreel Valley, and we're going to use this today to help us gain our feel for the Esdraelon Valley. Here's Mount Carmel jutting out into the sea, right? Remember that from day one, the coastal plain. Here's the plain of Dor. There's Dor right there. Here's the plain of Samaria. Caesarea is going to be down here. So here's the Esdraelon Valley. Here's the heart of it. Remember I said the Dothan Pass leads right into the heart of the Esdraelon Valley. The Bezek Pass leads down here, out here to the mouth of the Esdraelon Valley. This is it, the Valley of Jezreel, or Esdraelon, from northwest to southeast, and all of the nations of the world are traveling here. So I love this topographical map. This is what we will be using. The Valley of Esdraelon, which is the Greek word, or Jezreel, which is the Hebrew word. This means God sows, S-E-W-S, sows crops. He sows seeds to grow. And there's a prophetic reason why it's named that. I'll let you study that on your own. The Valley of Esdraelon or Jezreel, and I don't know when I'm talking this morning if I'll say Jezreel or Esdraelon. I think I use Esdraelon more than I use Jezreel, which is unfortunate because that's Greek and Jezreel's Hebrew, and I teach Hebrew. But anyway, I taught Hebrew. In any case, the Valley of Jezreel is a broad, fertile valley, very broad, as you saw, very fertile, dark black soil running northwest, southeast between the plain of Akko over on the Mediterranean and the Jordan Rift there in the east, right? It's extremely, 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 extremely strategic for commerce. And, of course, that means political tension, warfare, since it funnels all north-south travel through the region. And by through the region, we mean everyone going to Egypt, which is a major world player, or everyone coming from or going to the rest of the world. Syria, Assyria, Babylon, Greece, Rome. I think of the Esdraelon Valley, the word I like to use for it is a funnel. It's a funnel, a very narrow funnel, and everybody is traveling through here as they interact with each other, both positively in commerce and negatively in warfare. And this is owned by Israel. At God's behest, they are the ones who live in this strip of land that everybody in the world wants. Why is that? Why did God put them there? Because he wants them to know him, and he wants them to trust him, right? So, north, south, east, west, northeast, southeast, wherever you're going to travel through. You're going to funnel into this land bridge between all of the continents of the east, Europe, Asia, Africa. Israel is the land bridge between Europe, Asia, and Africa. It's the land bridge, and the Esdraelon Valley is the funnel that you have to squeeze through as you go across the land bridge, basically from every direction. Remember, to the east of all of this is the Sahara Desert. You just can't travel over there unless you're crazy, and there were a few crazy people who did it. But in any case, not only politically, commercially, and so forth, the valley is also agriculturally significant due to the higher rainfall the farther north you get. And we're quite a ways north now. The only other northern region we're going to look at is Galilee, right? Higher rainfall in the north, and the dark, rich soil that has run off of all of the hills over the thousands of years, not billions of years, the thousands of years of Earth history, all of that dirt running off of the hills into this valley, creating a beautiful, broad, wet, moist agricultural area. And there's another reason you really want to control the Esdraelon Valley. On the other hand, the higher rainfall amounts and the level terrain, it's a flat, plain, did create a problem, especially in the rainy season, with flooding and swamping. In Judges 4 and 5, Deborah and Barak fought Jabin, king of Hatzor, in this valley, and Jabin lost that battle. Why? Class? It was rainy and wet, and his chariots got stuck in the mud, right? So when we see roads going through here, especially the east-west ones, are going to hug the rim of the valley to avoid the middle of the valley, because in the rainy season, it does get muddy and wet and moist down there, and that accounts for one of the stories in the Bible with Deborah and Barak in Judges 4 and 5. So the Nahal Kishon flowed out of the northwestern end of the valley. The Nahal Harod, fed by a famous spring, Ein Harod. The word Ein means spring. So Ein Harod is a spring coming out of Mount Gilboa. We'll see this later, that provides water for the Nahal Harod. These are the rivers that are running out of both sides, both ends, as it were, of the Esdraelon Valley. We'll be talking quite a bit about them. There's the Nahal Kishon running to the west. Remember, there's a watershed kind of right in the middle of this. So the Nahal Kishon is running to the west. The Nahal Harod is running to the east, to the Jordan River. There's Ain Harod, the spring at the base of Mount Gilboa here. Those are defining the northwest, the southeastern ends of our valley. That's the spring that feeds Nahal Harod. Numerous passes give access to this valley through the ridges that surround it. And so in order to make sense of this and to tie it together in a segmented way, let's look at the valleys and the cities that are strategic to the Valley of Jezreel. Lines of communication, travel, are forced to traverse these passes through this rugged mountainous region. Let's look at the ridges and the passes, the cuts that are through them, and then the cities that control those cuts or those passes. Here we go. There's going to be a bunch of them. So we already know Mount Carmel. Let's start at the northeastern end. Mount Carmel, the thumb that juts out into the sea. So when you see a map of Israel, it looks like this. Remember, it comes down this way and then bump out and then this way again. That's Mount Carmel sticking out. That's the Carmel Ridge. We've already met it when we looked at the coast. The high mountain, Mount Carmel, 1,800 feet at its highest, juts into the Mediterranean Sea, forming a ridge, the tail of which extends all the way southeast down toward Mount Gilboa. We just saw Ain Harod at the base of Mount Gilboa. We'll talk about Mount Gilboa. But this Carmel Ridge is what defines most of the southern edge of the Valley of Esdraelon. Mount Carmel at the peak somewhere there is where Elijah fought with and defeated the prophets of Baal in 1 Kings 18. And of course, there is a church, a monastery, right exactly where that happened. Okay. Here's the Carmel Ridge. So remember, it's jutting out into the sea, and it's stretching all the way southeast down here until we get to Mount Gilboa, which forms the southern rim farther down here. There's really two major southern rim mountains, Mount Carmel and this ridge, and then Mount Gilboa and its ridge. Let's start with Mount Carmel and the passes that come through it or next to it. There's Mount Carmel. This is going to be down here, Mount Gilboa. All right. 5 passes and related cities are defined by the Carmel Ridge. So here we go. The Jezreel Valley. The Kishon Pass, we've already talked about the Nahal Kishon, which runs northwest through the bottom of this valley and empties into the plain of Akko and the Mediterranean Sea, connects the northern coast of Israel to the Esdraelon Valley. So the Kishon Pass is here where the Kishon River is running out to the Mediterranean Sea, right at Haifa, near Akko, Mount Carmel, the plain of Asher, the plain of Dor. The Kishon River is giving us access from the coast, let's say Dor, Akko, Akzib, from the coast into the Esdraelon Valley. We're going to come through the Kishon Pass, where the Kishon River has cut a way through to get into the Esdraelon Valley. Here's the way it looks on our satellite map. And now we've kind of swung around on our satellite image to look southeast down the valley. Way in the distance on the horizon are the plains of Moab, the country today of Jordan. Here's the Jordan Rift. There's the Dead Sea down there. Here's Mount Carmel and the Carmel Range. And here's the Esdraelon Valley. Here's the plain of Akko or Asher, the plain of Dor, right? Squeeze around Mount Carmel. And here's the Kishon running right through here out to the Mediterranean Sea and forming a way to get from the coast, the plain of Asher, into the Esdraelon Valley. And here's Mount Carmel, the monastery where Elijah fought the prophets of Baal is going to be right up here on the highest peak. And we're going to go up there and take a view in a moment down into the Kishon Pass, right? Makes sense to you? We are now actually standing on the monastery, and we're looking north down into the Kishon Pass. There's the Kishon River running out of the valley toward the Mediterranean. There's the river. Here's a highway today that goes out that pass. You can see semi-trucks and cars down there, which gives you a perspective of how high we are up and how wide. It's not really very wide at this end, the Kishon Pass out to the coast. All right, so there aren't a whole lot of nations traveling that direction. I mean, you're going to run into the Mediterranean Sea. You're going to be out of the plain of Asher. If that's where you want to be, great. This is the way you're going to go. But most of the travel is not going to be going east-west like this. It's going to be going south down toward the coast through the Megiddo Pass and stuff that we'll see in a minute. But we must acknowledge that there is a pass from the coast into this valley, and that is the Kishon Pass and the Kishon River. All right, we're just going to turn to the right. See this little hill here that's starting? We're going to look at the other side of that hill, and we're going to look down into then the Esdraelon Valley. So let's turn to the right. And here's the Esdraelon Valley. Here's the Carmel Range. All right, so here's the Carmel Range. And notice our highway, even our modern highway, is not out here in the middle of the Esdraelon Valley. It is it's hugging the southern rim. Because even if you look at this picture, here's standing water down here. I mean, they've created these little ponds, I guess you would call them, reservoirs, where they can preserve water. But the road, even the ancient road, is going to hug the Carmel Ridge here because you don't want to travel down here in the heart of the valley because of the swamping. All right, so here's the Carmel Ridge. Here's the Kishon Brook. When you actually get down there and see it, it's kind of like the Jordan River, or kind of a little creek, we would call it in Kansas or Nebraska. And now we're looking up at Moreh, which is the name of the Carmelite monastery. And once again, like Nevi Samuel, we don't want to go down and look at anything having to do with Elijah's whatever. We want to go up on the roof like these people, and we want to look at everything there is to see around there in the Jezreel Valley. Of course, the statue to Elijah slaying the prophets of Baal, which did happen on top of Mount Carmel. And remember, he took water, if I remember the story correctly, forgive me if I mistake it, my wife's the Bible trivia winner, but he poured water on his altar and sacrifice, and I believe that water, if I remember right, came from the Kishon, which means he had to go down there, we saw it, get the water, bring it up, and dump 10 buckets of water on the sacrifice, and of course God sent fire and burnt up not only the sacrifice, but the altar itself. That's a great story. It happened here on Mount Carmel. The next pass, we've looked at the Kishon Pass, which is kind of it's an important pass if you want to get to the coast, but let's look at the passes that are leading down, as it were, to Egypt and the rest of the world. One of them is the Jokneam Pass. There is a city, or a Tel Jokneam, an ancient city, that controlled the Jokneam Pass. The walled city of Jokneam sat at the base of Mount Carmel, about 12 miles from the Mediterranean. Okay, so from the plain of Asher and the Mediterranean Sea, when you squeezed around from Dor, around Mount Carmel, now you are about 12 miles in along the Carmel Ridge to Jokneam. Jokneam guards both the entrance into Esdraelon from the coast, the Kishon Pass. So if you come around from the plain of Dor, around Mount Carmel into the Kishon Pass, or you're coming down from the plain of Asher into the Kishon Pass, the first major city you're going to run into that's controlling in and out of that pass is going to be Jokneam. but it's also going to control the cut through Mount Carmel down toward the coastal plain and Egypt. All right. So it's guarding really two roads, that road hugging the southern rim coming from the coast, as well as the pass that's heading more down toward Egypt, the Jokneam Pass. The pass through the ridge, however, was kind of secondary to Megiddo. Megiddo is going to be the most important. Jokneam is kind of secondary to Megiddo because the Jokneam Pass led more toward the plain of Dor. And remember, that was kind of a back road squeezed in, almost a dead end kind of back road place. The pass of Megiddo is going to lead right down to Caesarea and Aphek. So the Jokneam Pass isn't leading us the best way to Egypt, but you can get there. It's eventually, if you turn the correct direction, it's going to join the road that goes through Megiddo. But the Jokneam Pass is secondary to Megiddo, let's say, though it's still important, and it's a very distinct pass that we need to control. It's also controlling, again, Jokneam is also controlling the road from the coast. All right. So it guards both the entrance into Esdraelon from the coast and the Pasika southwest. It's secondary because it leads mainly to the narrow coastal plain, the plain of Dor, north of the plain of Shimron. So here we are. The Jokneam Pass. Jokneam, the city, the controlling tell, is on the kind of the southeast side of the pass. And on my map, kind of unfortunately, I probably should redraw this. I've got the road kind of leading directly down to, the road, the Via Maris and Megiddo. But really, when we look at the pass in a minute on a satellite image, it really is going to angle more toward Dor and the plain of Dor, which is why you don't really want to take it if you don't have to get to Egypt, because the Megiddo Pass is going to be the most direct way to the rest of the world and down to Egypt. All right, that's the Jokneam Pass. Again, it's also controlling this road coming in from the coast. So it controls the Kishon Pass, and it controls the first pass heading south toward Egypt, as it were. Controlling both of these passes. All right. Here's a satellite image, which is a little more helpful to us at this point. Jokneam, Tel Jokneam is going to be right here. Here's the Kishon Pass. Here's the Jokneam Pass. And Jokneam is controlling that intersection. You can, from the satellite image, you can clearly see this gap here, this cut, right, in Mount Carmel. That's the Jokneam Pass. But notice it's kind of pointed toward Dor, in the plain of Dor here, rather than, here's the Megiddo Pass. It's heading right down toward Egypt more toward the plain of Shimron. Jokneam is heading more toward the plain of Dor. In any case, that is the Jokneam Pass. Let's look at a little more oblique view. On our satellite imagery, we see Mount Carmel jetting out into the sea. We see the plain of Asher and Akko. We see the Kishon Pass and the river Kishon, the Nahal Kishon going out here. And here's the Jokneam Pass. This break in the Carmel Ridge that is going to help us access particularly the plain of Dor. But we are able to get through Carmel and head south through the Jokneam Pass. Now we're looking more from the south, and I want to give you a shot that's looking right at the crack of the Jokneam Pass. Let me back it up there. You can see a modern road. In fact, there's probably the most important road today, modern road going into Esdraelon, is the Jokneam Pass rather than the Megiddo Pass. And there it is, right beneath us. Here's Mount Carmel. Here's the plain of Asher, the plain of Dor. The Carmelite monastery is right up here. And very clearly right here is the Jokneam Pass. All right. We are looking at an old aerial view of the Carmelite monastery, and we want to get on the roof there. We've already been on the roof and looked around. But what I want you to see is in the background. See this deep cut there? That's heading south toward the plain of Dor. This is the Jokneam Pass. I mean, it's very distinct. when you can overview it this way, leading to the plain of Dor down here and to the Esdraelon Valley over here. All right, let's go up on the roof of the Carmelite monastery and let's look into the Valley of Esdraelon. And right here is Tel Jokneam, this bare thing here. It's an absolutely huge tell guarding this pass that we can't really see here. I mean, here's like a 5, 6, 8-story building right here. And here's Tel Jokneam. It's absolutely massive. We've telephotoed in to Tel Jokneam, and the pass is going to be right down here, actually right here, coming into the Valley of Jezreel. Now look around. Remember, we need to look around. Green, flat, lush land with some water where they've collected it in these reservoirs. But our main road heading from the plain of Akko on toward the Megiddo Pass and the other passes is hugging the edge, the southern rim of Carmel, the northern rim of Carmel, the southern rim of the Esdraelon Valley, because we can't really drive out here very easily because of the waters and the swamping and so forth. So the road is going to hug the southern rim of the Esdraelon Valley. There's Tel Jokneam. I want you to see it. Let's turn to the right a bit, and we're losing Tel Jokneam, but the pass is going right behind these hills. And if we turn to the right once more, we'll see it a little better. And there it is. The Jokneam Pass running out toward the plain of Dor. Very, very distinct, very clearly cutting through the Carmel Ridge. Let's jump down on the road and let's drive into the Valley of Esdraelon. And here we are, major road, 4-lane road now, coming into the Jokneam Pass, and we're heading toward the Valley of Esdraelon and Tel Jokneam. If we look ahead of us and we pay attention, we begin to see the Tel way up above the road, right where we're going to enter the mouth of Esdraelon, and that's controlling everybody coming in and out of this road. If we look out of our bus to the left, up on a high hill, we're going to see what? We're going to see that Carmelite monastery up there, and there she be. We're going to turn back and look front out of our bus, and then we're going to get to Tel Jokneam. There's Tel Jokneam. Let's drive right next to it, and it's a horrible picture. The bus is moving. I'm sorry, but I had to put it in here. It's like you see this huge thing next to you, absolutely massive Tel. Let's get out more into the valley and look back at it. This is Tel Jokneam. This is controlling everything going into this valley to the right here, and everything coming across here from the Kishon Pass, that is controlling this region. All right, Tel Jokneam. Here it is on our map. Here is the pass. Notice it's leading more to the plain of Dor than it is to the Egypt and so forth, like the Megiddo Pass. There's Tel Jokneam. Here's Mount Carmel and the monastery, right? So let's get to the most important pass, the Megiddo Pass. The city and the pass. Like Jokneam, there is both a pass and a city that controls that pass. This is the most important of all of these passes. The strategic fortress city of Megiddo, about 7 miles southeast of Jokneam. So we've come in from the coast, 12 miles from the sea. Now 7 more miles along the Carmel Ridge, we come to Megiddo. Southeast of Jokneam in the Carmel Ridge, this next cut through, it's not really a cut, it's a break in the Carmel Ridge, guarded the main arterial pass, the Megiddo Pass, between Esdraelon, the Valley of Jezreel, and the coastal plain. And if it's the main pass from Esdraelon to the coastal plain, then it's also the main pass from Assyria to Egypt, right? Or from Greece to Egypt, or from Babylon to Egypt. The Megiddo Pass is the funnel through which all of these nations are traveling, and therefore everybody wants Megiddo. to control the Megiddo Pass. The coastal highway, the Via Maris, the international route, the international trunk route, whatever you want to call it, the Via Maris, the world interstate, which came out of Egypt on the coastal plain, funneled into the Megiddo Pass, and then as you head north, it heads north toward the rest of the world. And there is the Megiddo Pass, and there is our main route in blue coming from Egypt, avoiding the swamps of Sharon down here, hugging the hills of Samaria, and going through the Megiddo Pass, squeezing through the Megiddo Pass to head on northeast toward the Sea of Galilee and on to the rest of the world. Megiddo, the city, is controlling that pass and that route. Here's the Megiddo Pass, heading on to the Sea of Galilee and to the rest of the world. We're flying right over the Megiddo Pass. It's right beneath us now, very clearly a cut, a rift, a crack through the Carmel Ridge, looking north, emptying into the Esdraelon Valley, and then across to head to the Sea of Galilee and the rest of the world. There's the Megiddo Pass. Here's an aerial view of the Megiddo Pass. Here's the road, the modern road coming into the pass, heading north, 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 north. Tel Megiddo is going to be right over here guarding this entrance, and then on across the valley to the Sea of Galilee and the rest of the world. We'll be looking at all of that in a minute. Let's go down on our bus into the Megiddo Pass and drive up this way and see how that looks going through this pass. Forgive me, it's a horrible picture. It's through the front bus windshield, and there it is. It's the best I could do, and you do what you got to do. But I want you to get a feel for the road and how narrow this pass is. And you think of the Assyrians or the Egyptians or whoever having these huge armies that have to squeeze through this pass, and what are their enemies going to do? Well, they're going to be on either side of this, and they're going to be, doing their best to stop you from getting through this pass. Eventually you see the Valley of Jezreel, and it opens up. This narrow pass opens up to this beautiful broad valley, and that road is going to head on across. It's actually going to cross the heart of the valley down through the area that can be swampy, and it's going to head to the Sea of Galilee and the rest of the world. We're looking back now, and kind of an aerial view, it is an aerial view, of the Megiddo Pass. We had just come out of it. Now we're looking back into the Megiddo Pass, how narrow it is there, and the road heading on to the northeast in the Sea of Galilee, the rest of the world. Tel Megiddo is off here to our right, and there it is from the road. There's Tel Megiddo. And here's an aerial view of it. Again, here's a road with a van or something down here, a car. So this is a huge mound that's controlling the road that's hugging the southern rim and heading out to the coast. There's Mount Carmel sticking out into the sea. Here's the Carmelite monastery that we were on a little while ago. Here's the Jokneam Pass, and our road coming from the coast is hugging the southern rim. Here it comes, right past Megiddo. So Megiddo and Jokneam are controlling this east-west road, but also the Megiddo Pass that's over here to the rest of the world. Because of its strategic location, the city of Megiddo was occupied by numerous world powers. There are 20 levels. Archaeologists start digging down from the top from the latest occupation down, 20 times conquered and destroyed and rebuilt, conquered and destroyed and rebuilt 20 times. And I'll tell you why. I think it's right here. Yeah, Thutmose king, Pharaoh of the oppression, the one who oppressed the Israelites. There were rows of Pharaoh who didn't know Joseph, and so he oppressed the people. He equated owning Megiddo, capturing Megiddo, is like capturing 1,000 towns. The Pharaoh of Egypt wanted Megiddo. If you could give me 1,000 towns or Megiddo, I would take Megiddo. Thank you. Keep your 1,000 talents. I mean, that's pretty amazing. An Egyptian pharaoh saying that, right? Manasseh was north of Ephraim. They weren't given the Esdraelon Valley, but they were given the Carmel Ridge. And they were unable to take Megiddo and other cities on the ridge of Mount Carmel. Everybody in the world wanted it. And so Manasseh didn't have faith enough to believe that God could give it to them. Solomon fortified Megiddo, 1 Kings 9. Remember, Solomon wasn't to multiply wives. What did he do? Multiplied wives. Because God didn't want them to turn his heart away from the Lord to worship their gods, because they're Egyptian princesses, right? And he marries them because of the coalitions. Like, I'm going to get Gezer if I get this, ugly girl from Egypt, but I get Gezer. I'll take her. Yeah. So his wives, our foreign wives, are going to turn his heart away, and they did turn his heart away. Don't multiply wives. Don't multiply horses. Why? Because you're going to depend on your horses and your army rather than me. And guess what Solomon did? When he fortifies Megiddo, he puts stables up there with thousands of horses because he needs a strong army. So don't multiply wives, don't multiply horses, don't multiply riches. What did the Queen of Sheba say when she came? Man, nobody's as rich as this guy. I mean, this is Donald Trump on steroids. Forgive me for even saying that name. But anyway, Solomon was a great king, a great leader, a great man, but he didn't obey the Lord faithfully all of the time. And none of us do either, if we all admit it. But anyway, he did fortify Megiddo, and you'll see stables up there and the evidence of stables and horses and all of that stuff. Ahaziah died here from the wounds of Jehu. Josiah tried to keep Pharaoh Necho II from assisting Assyria in the war against Babylon. Should I take time for this? So, in the days of Josiah, Babylon now is a power. Assyria has come and captured the northern tribes, and now Babylon has conquered Assyria. Now Babylon's trying to conquer the world. Babylon's fighting for everything up there in the north before they can come down and fight Israel and then fight Egypt and try to take all that over. So Babylon's fighting up there in the north, and Pharaoh in Egypt doesn't want Babylon to win, because if Babylon wins in the north, he's going to come down and conquer Egypt. So the Pharaoh in Egypt is going to send his forces up to help everybody fighting in the north to try to stop Babylon up there. Well, King Josiah at that time was pro-Babylonian. He said, if I can make favor with Babylon, then maybe they won't come and conquer us. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to stop the Pharaoh of Egypt from getting up there to help Babylon, because I want Babylon to thank me for stopping the Egyptians from coming up to stop them. And so if Josiah in Jerusalem is going to stop the Pharaoh of Egypt from getting to fight with Babylon, where is Josiah going to do that? Well, he could try at Azekah, but you know what? Even better than trying to stop him at Azekah, let's try to stop him in the Megiddo Pass. It's a great place to try to stop him. So Josiah went up to try to stop Pharaoh Necho from getting fruit to the rest of the world. Through the Megiddo Pass, Josiah was defeated. Pharaoh did get up and help fight against Babylon, and he replaced Josiah. He dethroned Josiah. Josiah lost that battle, but he tried to cut Necho off at the pass. Literally, the Megiddo Pass, Josiah was slain in that attempt in 2 Kings 23. Megiddo, here's the chills down the spine, right? Megiddo will host the world's final battle. Har Megiddo, Mount Megiddo, Armageddon, Revelation 16. It's still important to world history, the future world history. And there will be another battle there, folks. Here's Tel Megiddo. It's a beautiful, beautiful national park. Megiddo is one of the first places Israel ever excavated, way back in the probably 50s, because it's so famous and so important. And they built a beautiful park there. It's a great place to visit. They've got a great museum, nice bathrooms, nice cantina. It's a great place. In the museum, they have a mock-up of Solomon's city. Notice here, I want you to see, well, these are all stables for horses, right? Dwelling places, a nice palace area. I want you to see this. Remember I talked about gate complexes and Solomonic gates. Here's the Solomonic gate. You can see ruins of that. A gate complex that makes it very difficult to conquer because you've got to come in here and make a left turn, and there are guys up here throwing spears and arrows at right-handed people who don't have a shield on this side. I mean, it's just really interesting to see their strategy there. All right, let's walk up the path to the tell. And while we're walking up to Megiddo, look around and see what you can see. If you look off to the east as you walk up there, you'll see Mount Carmel jutting out into the sea, which means Jokneam is right down there, the coastal plain. And on this bump right here, it's kind of hard to see in the slide, but there's a white building on top of this bump. That is the monastery where we were standing on the roof looking back this way. So keep, your eyes out on everything, and you'll get a good feel for all of the strategy that's happening here in the Esdraelon Valley, the Carmelite monastery. Here is a middle bronze gate that they've discovered there. Here is a casement wall. There's really a double wall here. They built two walls, and they put rubble and stuff in between them. So if your enemy builds a ramp and they put a battering ram here and they start battering that outside wall, what's that going to do to all the rubble and dirt there in the middle? It's going to compress it, right? I mean, you buy a box of cereal and it's half full. Why? Well, it was probably full at the factory, but it's bounced around and stuff, and it all settles, right? So here's the strategy. You build two walls, you fill dirt and rubble in between, and when they batter that wall, it just gets stronger and stronger because all that stuff's compacting. That's a casement wall. Here's probably a grain storage silo if you have people and horses up on this hill, and if they can't break through the wall or get through that gate, they're going to lay siege to you and try to starve you out. You need all the food you can get for your people, for your horses. Here's the grain storage area. Here's one of those mangers we talked about. Apparently it had rained and there's some water in there, so we can see where the water or the grain would be for the horses. They put these stones, this is kind of funny, they put these stones on the end of it because the stones have a hole through them, and apparently somebody thought, well, maybe that's where you tie up your horses. These are actually weight stones, weights, W-E-I-G-H-T-S. These stones would be hung on a rope that would pull down a wine press that would squeeze grapes to make grape juice. So I doubt if those are still next to the mangers, because they're really not a place to tie your horse. If you're going to tie your horse somewhere, you don't need to carve a hole through a stone. But anyway, that's a manger. We saw one of those outside of Bethlehem, right? And they've actually, now they built this metal thing that looks like a horse. I mean, he had thousands of horses up there because that's what he used with his military to try to defend the city. Here's the water system at Megiddo, and I told you I'd talk about water systems. You're up on a hill, and I'm sorry, Jack and Jill, there's not water at the top of the hill, right? I never could figure that out. Anyway, so how do you get water? You need water for horses. You need water for people. You don't want them to starve you out, drown you out. How do you get water on top of a hill? Well, you're going to start to build your city on a hill that has a spring next to it. And then you're going to dig down and tunnel over to the spring so that you can get access to that from the top of the hill. You're going to see this here at Megiddo. You're going to see this at Hatzor. We saw the pool at Gibeon. It's going to be in Jerusalem, Hezekiah's tunnel and all that stuff. That has to do with getting water inside of a city when the water's down at the bottom of the hill at a spring, so to speak. So we'll come back to that picture. Here we are. Here's Tel Megiddo. I drew this. I think this is pretty cool. Forgive me, but here's Megiddo. And how are we going to get water up there? Well, here's a spring at the bottom. You're going to find a hill that has a spring, and that's where you're going to build your city, because you have water, but now the water's down in the spring, and what are you going to do if they lay siege to you and find your spring? So here's what you do. You start digging, and then you drop a shaft down, and then you start to tunnel over to the spring. Now we've got water at the spring that's going to run into our tunnel, but we've got to block up the spring. In fact, we got to cover it up so the enemy can't find it. And now the water's running not off the side of the hill down into the valley, it's running into this tunnel. And so you're going to build some stairs, probably, and you're going to send your wife and your daughter down the stairs with the bucket, and they're going to drop it down, the shaft, and they're going to get water and pull it up, and your wife and your daughter are going to bring it back up, and they're going to, why your wife and your daughter? I mean, you're a sexist, Beacham, right? When Jesus stopped at a well to get a rest, who came to get the water? Yeah, the women. I mean, I'm sorry, that's just what they did. The woman at the well. All right, so the women are going to be going down these steps, dropping buckets down the shaft, and the water has been now directed into the city, and you have supplied a permanent source of water. You can go down the water system at Megiddo. It's a great thing to do. Here are the old ancient steps leading down to the shaft, which is going to lead down into the tunnel. In fact, today you can go down the steps, and you can actually go down the shaft, and you eventually get down to the tunnel. I mean, this is rock. They had to carve this out of rock underneath the city, down the tunnel till you get to the spring. And here are some folks, tourists, looking down into the spring. They built some stairs where you can get out the back way, so to speak. That's the water system at Megiddo. It's fascinating to see. And these are all over Israel. There's one in Jerusalem that we'll talk about. All right. When you stand at Megiddo, look at Megiddo, spend time there. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to be. But don't forget to stop somewhere and look at everything around you, right? When we were walking up to the city, we saw to the west, the northwest, the Carmelite monastery, Mount Carmel, sticking out to the sea. Now let's look toward the southeast, okay, and see where we're headed now in the future. Here's, again, the Valley of Esdraelon. We're looking toward the southeast. Here's the Carmel Ridge is starting to become less distinct. Here's our road hugging the Carmel Ridge. We're going to see another mountain jutting out down here. That's Mount Gilboa. Down in the distance, our other passes are going to be heading down that way. So be sure we look toward the next pass, which is Taanach, and then eventually way in the distance there is Mount Gilboa. We'll actually come back to this place and look at some other things later. So we've looked at the Kishon Pass, Mount Gilboa jutting out, Kishon Pass. We've looked at the Jokneam Pass and Tel Jokneam. We've looked at Megiddo and the Megiddo Pass. We're heading now to Taanach and the Taanach Pass. Notice on this model, there's no road going in here, which is telling us that look at this, there's really no easy way to get down to the coast. What's going to happen is this is going to branch over and either hit the Megiddo Pass or branch this way and hit the Dothan Pass. So Taanach isn't the most important. In fact, it's not even as important as any of these other ones, but it still was a crack into the region. And so it was held by many nations because they didn't want people sneaking through the back door, basically. All right. Taanach, city and pass. The town of Taanach was situated about 5 miles southeast of Megiddo. So Megiddo is 7 miles from Jokneam, Taanach's 5 miles from Megiddo. It controlled a pass heading south through the Carmel Ridge, the Taanach Pass, into northern Samaria. But again, it's not a very easy pass. It also controlled the east-west road that's hugging the base of the Carmel Ridge that we just saw, connecting Jokneam, Megiddo, Taanach, and then on down to the next pass, the Dothan Pass. It's controlling that road as well. So east, west, and north-south travel. The Taanach Pass is secondary, maybe even tertiary, maybe even whatever the fourth area word is. Doubling back through the hills of Samaria to meet the Megiddo or the Dothan passes, as I showed you earlier. Still, other foreign powers did fight to control Taanach. So here it is on our map. And notice again, the roads just kind of either lead to Megiddo or Dothan, but it was an important strategic place. Here is the Taanach Pass on our satellite. Let's get a little better view, that oblique view, where we're looking right down the Taanach Pass. Here it is right there, into the Valley of Esdraelon. But branching off, not a very easy place to travel, as you can see. And now we're looking the other way, our aerial view into the Taanach Pass. And here is Tel Taanach. Here's that east-west road hugging the rim of the Gilboan Ridge that goes to Megiddo this way, Jokneam this way, and the Sea Mediterranean and so forth. So it is guarding this road as well. That's hugging the ridge of the Carmel. There's Taanach. We are actually on a road kind of in the middle of the Esdraelon Valley, and if you are careful, you can look and see in the distance, in the haze, right there, Tel Taanach. Here is a view that I didn't take this picture. I've never been this close to Taanach. I've never been on top of Taanach. I doubt if very many people can get there now, but here's a view I think maybe Todd Bolin took of Tel Taanach. Notice again, these are huge, high, massive controlling cities, right? So that's Taanach right here. Let's go to our next pass, the Dothan Pass. You say, well, that sounds familiar. Yeah, we've already talked about Dothan, right? In the northern part of Samaria. I'm calling it here the Dothan Ibleam Pass because as you head north from Dothan toward Esdraelon, there's another biblical town mentioned in the Bible, Ibleam. So let's call this the Dothan Ibleam Pass. It was examined in the study of Samaria. Remember, Dothan was at second base. It's where the Elisha's servants saw the armies of the Lord, right? This pass provided easy access to Esdraelon from the heart of Samaria. So if you're the northern tribes, if you're the king of the northern tribes, with your capital particularly at Samaria, you want the Dothan Pass because this is your access to Esdraelon and the rest of the world. This is the Samaria's access to the rest of the world. And that's why the Dothan Pass was important, particularly to them. Here's the Dothan Pass. Remember, Shechem, Tirzah, Dothan, Samaria. If you're the king of Israel, you want the Dothan Pass because it's going to get you to the Via Maris and the rest of the world. There's Ibleam, more at the mouth of the Jezreel Valley. Okay, so the Dothan Pass, when you come in it from the Valley of Esdraelon and you get to Dothan, remember Dothan was right here, you're either going to head on south to Samaria or you're going to turn down the Wadi Faria and get to Tirzah. So once again, if you are the northern tribes, you want the Dothan Pass, it's going to get you to, as it were, the rest of the world. We are looking at Dothan. There's Dothan right there. Dothan, here's the road coming from Tirzah, here's the road coming from Samaria, and now we are moving into the Esdraelon Valley here. This is Ibleam. Dothan, Ibleam, to the rest of the world here in the Esdraelon Valley. There's Tel Dothan again, and that is the Dothan Pass right here, getting us into the Jezreel Valley. All right, now we're down to Mount Gilboa. Let me back up. Here's Mount Gilboa right here. We've left the Carmel Ridge, and now we're looking at Mount Gilboa jutting up into the eastern end of the Jezreel Valley. About 10 miles in length, this ridge, the Gilboa Ridge, juts into and defines the southeastern edge of the valley. Ein Harod, the spring Harod that feeds the Nahal, the river Harod, gushes out of the base of Mount Gilboa. And the spring is very famous because of Gideon and his men. On Mount Gilboa, Gideon amassed his troops against the Midianites. And that's why, you remember, God said, well, I don't want that many men. You're going to think your army did it, so call out the men, have them drink from the spring. And if they lap like a dog, you either do or don't want. I think the ones that lap like a dog you don't want, the ones who bring the water up the mouth, those are the ones you want. He ended up with 300 guys. But that happened at the spring because he's camped here on Mount Gilboa to fight the Midians who are across the valley on another hill, which we'll talk about in a minute. Saul also amassed his troops on Mount Gilboa against the Philistines who are on the other mountain across the way, which we'll look at in a minute. And Saul lost that battle. In fact, Saul and Jonathan lost their lives on Mount Gilboa here in 1 Samuel 28, 29, and 31. So here's Mount Gilboa and the Gilboa Range jutting out into the southeastern end of the Valley of Jezreel. Here's the Gilboa Range. We are now flying in our, Google Earth map into the Esdraelon Valley from the Jordan River. The Jordan River is right beneath us. And here's the mouth of the Esdraelon Valley. It's kind of hard to see from this perspective. Mount Carmel is jutting into the sea way down here. So you've got, Jokneam, Megiddo, Taanach, Dothan Pass. I want you to see Mount Gilboa jutting out here. Mount Gilboa is jutting out and kind of interrupting the southeastern end of the valley and defining everything that's going into the valley from the Jordan River. We'll get a better grasp of that in a moment. There's Mount Gilboa. We are standing back on the Carmelite monastery. So we're way back again on Mount Carmel. We're standing on the roof of that monastery, and we're looking east toward the Jordan Rift, and there in the distance is Mount Carmel. Here's Jokneam again. Megiddo, Taanach, Dothan. There's Mount Gilboa from Mount Carmel. Again, here's Mount Gilboa. The Harod Pass is where the Harod River, the Ein Harod, is feeding this river, and it's running down to the Jordan. And this is our last pass on the southern eastern end of the Esdraelon Valley. The Nahal Harod flows from the spring Harod that gushes out of the base of Mount Gilboa and runs southeast toward the Jordan River, forming the Harod Pass. So there's the Harod Pass flowing down to the Jordan. Here's an aerial view from our satellite. Here's the Sea of Galilee. Here's the Jordan Rift. Here's Mount Gilboa. The spring is going to be right here. And Ein Harod, the river Harod, is running out here, forming this part of the pass into Esdraelon, the heart of Esdraelon. So that's the Harod Pass from the Jordan River into the Esdraelon Valley. We're going to be on a road like right about here and looking at Mount Gilboa into the mouth of the Esdraelon Valley. There's Mount Gilboa in all of its glory. What did I say? 4,000 feet. Jutting into the valley, notice the dark black soil, crops being grown. We're now entering the southeastern end. The Jordan River is behind us. And we're entering the Esdraelon Valley from the southeast. Here's an aerial view of this cave. It looks like a cave. It's actually the spring of Harod. You see a little rivulet running here. I mean, the water is literally gushing from the base of Mount Gilboa, creating this little rivulet where Gideon's army drank, and he filtered out those who shouldn't fight with him. Here's the water coming right out of the rock and feeding this little river, and you can kind of imagine Gideon's men bending down and drinking out of this stream. This is a satellite image of Ein Harod and the Harod Pass. Again, here's Mount Gilboa. There's Mount Carmel in the distance. The spring would be right here, running out to the Jordan River, creating our entrance from the rift. All right. So we looked at Ein Harod and the Harod Pass. Let's look at one of the most important cities, a couple important cities at the eastern gate to Esdraelon. If the Kishon Pass is like the western gate from the coast, then the Harod Pass is the eastern gate in and out of the Esdraelon Valley. And there are two important cities there for our purposes. One is big, huge city. The other is a little tiny city, but let's talk about them. Beth-Shan. If you've ever been to Israel, you've been to Beth-Shan. I mean, that's one of the tourist places to go, and it's an important place to go. So Beth-Shan is going to be a controlling city at the eastern end, the eastern door into the Valley of Jezreel. Beth-Shan was a major city where the pass opens out to the Jordan Rift. Israel was never able to conquer this city in the days of the judges. In fact, Israel never conquered Beth-Shan. Saul and Jonathan's bodies were hung here by the Philistines after their death on Mount Gilboa. Remember I said Saul and Jonathan amassed their troops on Mount Gilboa, overlooking the army, the Philistines on the other side, a mountain on the other side, which we'll talk about in a moment. But Saul lost that battle. He and his son died. And when the Philistines found the body of Saul and Jonathan, they hung them up on the wall of Beth-Shan as trophies of the defeat. In New Testament times, it was one of the cities of the Roman Decapolis, the 10 major cities of Rome in the region, and Beth-Shan was one of them. So it's going to be, they're going to be beautiful, amazing Roman ruins here in Beth-Shan. Has a long history of major occupation with an ancient upper tell, an older city before the Roman city down below, this ancient huge tell with 18 levels of occupation. Megiddo had 20. So it's almost up there with Megiddo. And then this huge tell, as the Romans built, they built down beneath the tell on the lower area. And there's the most beautiful, Roman ruins there to see that Israel has excavated over the last 20, 30 years or so. So here's Beth-Shan at the eastern end of the valley, controlling everything going from the Jordan River right here into the Esdraelon Valley around Mount Gilboa and heading into the heart of the Jezreel Valley. Beth-Shan is controlling that eastern door. We're going to zoom in down here to Beth-Shan, and we're going to look into the valley. And here is Tel Beth-Shan. Here's the Roman city down below. There's Mount Gilboa. Here's the Harod River, Nahal Harod, coming from the spring. Nahal Harod. And so Beth-Shan is here governing everybody going in to this end of the Esdraelon Valley. Here's an aerial view of Tel Beth-Shan. Mount Gilboa is off to our left, so we're looking kind of north. I guess I would say the Roman city down below, the huge tell of Old Testament Beth-Shan, and the Nahal Harod is running right down here next to it. And anybody going in or out of the Esdraelon Valley is going next to by Beth-Shan. We are now walking into the Roman city. That huge tell is always dominating our view in the distance there. You begin to see Roman streets, Roman colonnades. To our right here is, of course, the Roman theater. right? There's always got to be a Roman theater. This is an interesting picture because you can see the top. There was another tier of the theater here. You see this black part here? That's the way it looked when they discovered it. This has been restored. So the archaeologists didn't find this. They found this, and they restored it. Okay, so here's the theater, here's the stage. It's just really a beautiful thing to visit. And always, again, in the distance is that Old Testament ancient tell where the city sat before the days of Rome. Let's talk about the theater for just a minute. No doubt a beautiful place. You can see columns over here and on the stage area. It's fun to visit. Again, notice the unrestored part at the top there. Here's an artist rendition of what it would look like to sit there and watch a play or something with a 3-story stage and people at balconies and Romeo and Juliet. But I mean, it didn't exist yet. But anyway, it would have been neat to see that there. Of course, the rich people sat in the seats, and the dignitaries, the seats with the backs, up here at the top. And a little feel for the beauty of the colonnades and the carvings and so forth. This is right next to the theater. I want you to figure out what this room would have been. And this isn't where you buy popcorn. I'll understand. So, I mean, the Romans were very sophisticated. They had plumbing underneath the city with sewers and running water and all of that stuff. And so, forgive me, but here we go. How does this work? Well, one cheek on this side, one cheek on that side, and you can imagine the rest. But yeah, this is a public bathroom with plenty of stalls here right next to the theater. I mean, the Romans knew how to build cities, and I'm sorry for being a bit crude there, but it's a way of life, and the Romans had figured out how to handle every exigency in a large city like that. Here's a beautiful Roman colonnaded street with, of course, like our streets today, there's the sewage system running right down the middle of the street. But no doubt in the days before this was all destroyed by earthquakes and so forth, it was no doubt a gorgeous, gorgeous place. They've put along the way some metal sculptures, little sculptures of what that part of the city would have looked like with descriptions and so forth. We don't have time to look at all of that. At Caesarea, I showed you a building like this that I said I would explain later. I really don't want to take time here either. We're going to see this. We saw it at Caesarea. We'll see it here. We'll see it at Masada. This is a steam room. This is a steam bath, a bathhouse. And so these pillars held an artificial floor. The floor was actually on top of these pillars, and underneath here is hot water steaming up, the steam coming through pipes along the edge so that you would sit in here, a nice warm floor, and all the steam is coming up. And the Romans, of course, were very indulgent with steam rooms and cold rooms and baths and, bathhouses and all that kind of thing. That's what this is. Again, an artist's rendition of some of the colonnaded streets with these sculptures that help us, depict what that would have looked like back then. They've reconstructed some of these pillars, beautiful mosaic floors, intricate designs. There's so much to see there. This is all Roman again. But always we want to keep in mind this huge tell over here, which is the Old Testament or the ancient city up on this huge ridge. And if you have time and ability, you can climb up the stairs or go around the other end, is what we did ages ago, a ramp kind of thing. And you can get to the top of the ancient city. Here are some brave folks walking up the steps. I came around the other way up a ramp into the old gates of the ancient city on top of the tell. And now we're looking back at Mount Gilboa because Beth-Shan is controlling everybody entering in here to the Esdraelon Valley, and we don't want to forget that. We're looking down now more toward the entrance. Here's the Jordan River here, the Sea of Galilee is right up here. This is the Golan Heights on the other side of the Jordan Rift. Here's Ein Harod, the Nahal Harod running down here. There was an ancient Roman bridge that crossed the Nahal Harod. There's the bridge, or what's left of it. And again, now we're looking down from the tell into the Roman city. There's the theater and so forth. I mean, it's just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place to visit. But please, again, don't lose sight of what this city is doing. It's controlling entrance into the Esdraelon Valley, where everybody in the world is traveling. It's controlling the eastern mouth of that valley. And 18 levels of occupation, very much like Megiddo. Farther away is an amphitheater, and again, you will visit Beth-Shan. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to go. Because Israel never controlled Beth-Shan, there's a little city, let me back up, near Beth-Shan, just south of Beth-Shan, called Rehob, and Israel was able to take and control Rehob, which gave them a little bit of a toe into the eastern end of the Valley of Esdraelon, or Jezreel. Rehob is a small city just south of Beth-Shan, probably served as Israel's controlling city, as it were, in the region of the Harod Pass, since Israel never controlled Beth-Shan. Even Rehob remained in the hands of the Canaanites until David conquered it, the whole region of Galilee, in around 1000 BC, 1 Chronicles 18. Since Israel never controlled Beth-Shan, Rehob was its gateway, its door, as it were, kind of a little side door into the eastern end of the Esdraelon Valley. Here's Beth-Shan, here's the Esdraelon Valley, Mount Gilboa, and here's little Rehob, the little tell right there that Israel was able to control. Here's Tel Rehob. I said little. It's little compared to Beth-Shan, but it's a rather significant mound on which was a city that eventually Israel did control. All right, so Beth-Shan, right here. Rehob, everything coming into the mouth of the valley from the Jordan. I want to go next to this city. This is Jezreel. Jezreel is controlling the eastern entrance from the inside of the valley, is the way I say it. Does that make sense to you? Here's Beth-Shan controlling the out. You know, let's say you're walking into the grocery store. There's an outer door, right? And then a foyer, and then an inner door. All right. So Beth-Shan is the outer door. You enter the Esdraelon Valley, but you come to Jezreel, which is also, controlling the inner door, the inside of the eastern end of the valley. And Jezreel, that name should sound familiar to you, right? Jezreel guarded the Harod Pass at its western end, inside. It's the inside door to the Esdraelon Valley. Here's our aerial view, and there is Tel Jezreel. Right down here is Beth-Shan, okay? So Beth-Shan and Jezreel on this little mountain, which is kind of a little island coming off of Mount Gilboa. Here's Mount Gilboa. And this little hill, is where Ahab and Jezebel, the Phoenician princess, right? Ahab and Jezebel set up a summer palace. Their actual palace was in Samaria, right? Shechem, Tirzah, Dothan, Samaria. That's their real palace. But when you want to get, out into the country, in the beautiful Esdraelon Valley, and, feel the breezes and see the scenes and whatever, soak up the sun, then you're going to go to your summer palace here at Jezreel. This is where Elijah outran Ahab's chariot from Mount Carmel to Jezreel when he defeated the prophets of Baal. Mount Carmel. So he ran all the way from Mount Carmel here to Jezreel and got there before Ahab's chariot, and that's an interesting story. I don't know exactly how to explain it. Was he a fast runner? Did God transport him? I don't know. I'll let you deal with that. But those are the two places. We saw Mount Carmel, and here is Jezreel, all right? Obviously, he's having all kinds of dealings with Ahab and Jezebel here at Jezreel. So there it is. It's kind of a little bump that has broken off, let's say, of Mount Gilboa, right here near Ein Harod, and controlling, again, the eastern end of the Esdraelon Valley from the inside of the valley. Ahab, this is where Ahab coveted Naboth's vineyard. I mean, it makes sense that there'd be a vineyard in this beautiful Esdraelon Valley. This is where Ahab coveted and stole that vineyard. Joram of Israel, Ahab's son, rested here. After his wounds at the Battle of Ramoth-Gilead, Ahaziah of Judah came here to visit him. We don't have time to look at all these stories. They might ring a bell in your mind. Otherwise, look at these passages later. Jehu slew Joram in Naboth's vineyard in revenge for Ahab stealing Naboth's vineyard. In fact, Jehu also wounded Ahaziah as he fled toward Dothan, the Dothan Pass, and this is where Jehu had Jezebel thrown out of the summer palace window in retaliation, God's retaliation against Ahab coveting Naboth's vineyard. Ahab coveted the vineyard, but he didn't take it until what? Jezebel said, well, you're the king, just take it. And so Jezebel paid for that here at Jezreel because she was thrown out of the window and eaten by dogs. Jehu had the 70 heads of Ahab's son sent from Samaria to Jezreel. So a lot of stuff is happening here. I remember standing on Jezreel and looking out the eastern end of the valley because Jehu was coming, I think, from Ramoth-Gilead, from the Jordan Rift, let's say, and you're standing on Jezreel, you're looking east toward Beth-Shan and the Jordan River, and remember it says, I remember my mom talking about this, Jehu drove furiously. My mom used to say, that person's driving like Jehu, He drove furiously, and now I'm standing on Jezreel, and I'm looking toward Beth-Shan and the Jordan River, and here comes Jehu driving furiously. Mom, I got to see that, After all the people in Newton, Kansas, you said there were Jehus. Anyway. All right. We're on a road kind of in the Esdraelon Valley, and here is Tel Jezreel. Here's Mount Gilboa right next to it, and this is kind of a little break off of Mount Gilboa. There's Tel Jezreel right there. We're now climbing up onto Tel Jezreel, and we're standing on Tel Jezreel looking back at that road we were just on. Gilboa's behind us. We're looking across the north side of the Esdraelon Valley. There in the distance is going to be the Nazareth Ridge, which we'll talk about in a minute. We'll talk a lot about this hill right here. It's called the Hill of Moreh, which is very, very biblically significant. We've actually turned a little bit to our right. We're looking right at the Hill of Moreh, which sits in the middle of, as it were, the middle of the Esdraelon Valley, a very, very important hill that we will talk about a lot. But this is the Esdraelon Valley as it's coming from the Mediterranean Sea and Megiddo and Taanach and Jokneam and all those places. And this road right here is heading out toward Beth-Shan and the Jordan River. Notice again, there's water down here. Let's turn to our right a little bit. And I was up there a couple times before somebody pointed this out to me. I don't remember who it was. We've just lost the Hill of Moreh here to the left, but you see a stand of trees here. And, of course, I grew up in Kansas. You're from Nebraska. When you see trees, what should you think? Why are there trees there? There's water, right? There's water there. And in 1 Samuel 29, it talks about David encamping by the spring of Jezreel. It's like, oh, remember springs are down at the bottom. And there are trees, so there is a little spring. Ein Harod is very near there, water gushing out of Mount Gilboa, so it shouldn't surprise us to find other springs. There's the spring of Jezreel, and it's mentioned in 1 Samuel 29. Let's turn on to the right, and we see the Esdraelon Valley now heading toward Beth-Shan. Turn to the right again. Now we see Mount Gilboa, And the restriction then of the eastern end of the valley heading down to the Jordan Rift is heading right here past Mount Gilboa. Let's turn behind us and look at some of the ruins on top of Tel Jezreel. Again, I'm not so much as into exploring the ruins, that you can tell, as I am into seeing what's all around there. And so we go and look at a few ruins, and that's fine. We don't know exactly what everything is, but there are ruins everywhere you go. And if somebody explains them to you, great. If they don't, I'm not too worried about it. Ruins are ruins. Here's Jezreel. And remember I mentioned the hill of Moreh. There it is, straight across from us. That's going to be very important to us in a minute. And now we're going to start to move in this direction and look at the northern side of the Jezreel Valley, and not just the hill of Moreh, but more interesting, I guess, in a way to us at this point, is this huge ridge over here. This is called the Nazareth Ridge. And I think that's where we're headed next. Let's see. Hey, imagine that. My brain isn't as mushy as I imagined. The Nazareth Ridge, we're on the north side now of the Esdraelon Valley. We've defined the whole southern side with Mount Carmel and Mount Gilboa, and we've looked at all of the southern rim of the Esdraelon Valley. Now let's look at the north side, and most of that north side, I guess I would say, a major part of that north side is defined by the Nazareth Ridge. It's an imposing, steep ridge. It's a very steep, scarp, jutting up from the base of the Esdraelon Valley, 1,300 feet, that defines much of the northern rim of the valley. If you remember, when Jesus first spoke in the synagogue there, and he read from Isaiah, and he sat down like halfway through and essentially claimed to be the Messiah, what did they want to do? They wanted to throw him off the cliff, and he passed between them. I mean, this is Nazareth Ridge, and it is a cliff. Now remember, Jesus is his hometown. This is where he was, I almost said born. He was born in Bethlehem, but he was raised here. That's an interesting thing to think about. I wish we wouldn't have time now, but if he lived and his parents came from Nazareth, why in the world would he be born in Bethlehem? Well, it's really interesting because some Caesar Augustus way off in Rome decided he was going to, tax the people. And so if he's going to tax them, he's going to do a census. Instead of sending people to knock on your door, you've got to go back to your ancestral home to be counted and to be taxed. And so here's Mary. She's 8.5 months pregnant, and they've got to go to Bethlehem to be taxed. Well, where did the Messiah have to be born? Bethlehem. Remember Naomi, Ruth, and Boaz, and Obed, and Jesse, and David, and the Messiah had to be born in Bethlehem. So here they have to travel all the way from Nazareth to Bethlehem, and eventually they get back here to Nazareth. This is his hometown, and the Nazareth Ridge is very, very important. So here it is, the Nazareth Ridge on the north side of the Esdraelon Valley. Two passes are defined by the northern ridge. One is Mount Tabor and the Tabor Pass. Mount Tabor is a tall, rounded mountain, about 2,000 feet, at the eastern end of the Nazareth Ridge, kind of like Jezreel broke off of Mount Gilboa. The Mount Tabor kind of broke off of the Nazareth Ridge, and it's this rounded mountain. It's very easy to see, very easy to know where it is and what it is. It's this rounded mountain. It's like somebody took one of those styrofoam balls and cut it in half and put it, on the floor of the mountain right next to the Nazareth Ridge. So you've got this rounded mountain, that's Mount Tabor, at the eastern end of the Nazareth Ridge, guarding the main northern pass into this valley. Deborah and Barak fought Jabin, king of Hatzor, and Sisera, his captain, from Mount Tabor. Judges 4, when the rains came and the Jabin's chariots bogged down, that's all tied here to Deborah and Barak and Mount Tabor. The Tabor Pass, as it circumvents Mount Tabor, provided access for the main arterial route to and from Megiddo and to the Via Maris as it heads to the north. So now think that international route now that's going to cross up to the Sea of Galilee. It's got to go around Mount Tabor. Now we're looking at that road as it heads up to the Sea of Galilee. The road from Megiddo then, coming up from the plains of Sharon, from Caesarea, from Aphek, from Joppa, from Egypt, that road coming up the coast, squeezing into the Megiddo Pass, is cutting over toward Mount Tabor and has to go around Mount Tabor. Let's read this. The Tabor Pass provided access for the main route. The road from Megiddo traveled across, kitty corner across the Esdraelon Valley toward Mount Tabor. It passes between Mount Tabor and the hill of Moreh that I just talked about. Between Mount Tabor and the hill of Moreh, which sat on the valley floor. So here comes our Via Maris. There's Nazareth, the Nazareth Ridge. This little circle here is the way that I'm picturing on your map, Mount Tabor. It's kind of broken off of the Nazareth Ridge, but there it is, sticking up as a rounded mountain. And the road, there's the hill of Moreh. Remember Jezreel, we looked across at the hill of Moreh. All right. So our road is coming from Egypt through the Megiddo Pass. It's crossing over between the hill of Moreh and Mount Tabor, the Nazareth Ridge, and then it's turning north, and it's going to squeeze through a crack in this mountain, Mount Arbel, and get down to the Sea of Galilee and head to the rest of the world. So the Tabor Pass between Mount Tabor and the hill of Moreh is the Via Maris, where all of the world is traveling. They've got to go through the Tabor Pass to get to the Megiddo Pass, or from the Megiddo Pass through the Tabor Pass up to the Sea of Galilee and on to the rest of the world. Here's the Nazareth Ridge. There's Mount Tabor, kind of a rounded hill broken off of the Nazareth Ridge. There's the hill of Moreh. And here comes our road from the Megiddo Pass, around the hill of Moreh, which is right there, around Mount Tabor, which is right there, north through a crack in the Arbel Range, the Sea of Galilee. We'll look at Galilee and Mount Arbel tomorrow. But right now, we want to think about Mount Tabor, the rounded mountain, and the hill of Moreh, because our Via Maris is passing right between those two. Here's the Nazareth Ridge, where Jesus grew up. Very important to get this in your head, all right? You'll see why in a minute. Nazareth Ridge, Mount Tabor, hill of Moreh, Esdraelon Valley, and here comes our road from Megiddo, between the hill of Moreh, around Mount Tabor, through a crack in Mount Arbel, to the Sea of Galilee and on to the rest of the world. I'm calling this the Tabor Pass. Here's the modern city of Nazareth on this high cliff, the Nazareth Ridge. Mount Tabor is a little break off of this Nazareth Ridge. All right, we're back on Megiddo. I do this on purpose. When you're at Megiddo, don't forget to look at where you are. We're standing on Mount Megiddo. We're looking into the Esdraelon Valley toward the east. And here is the Nazareth Ridge. Remember, Mount Gilboa is over here. There's Mount Gilboa and Beth-Shan and Jezreel, right? Here's the Nazareth Ridge. Very clearly, this rounded mountain is Mount Tabor. And there's the hill of Moreh, right? You can see all of that from Megiddo, as plain as day on a clear day. On a clear day, you can see forever, right? You got to be old to get that one. Okay. So the Megiddo Pass, I mean, you're going to come out of the Megiddo Pass here. You're going to go around the hill of Moreh on the north side. You're going to skip the Nazareth Ridge and you're going to go around Mount Tabor on the south side. So you're going between the hill of Moreh and Mount Tabor. On the other side of Tabor, you're cutting north. That's the Tabor Pass, and eventually through a crack in a mountain to get down to the Sea of Galilee. This is all so important. You've got to stand on Megiddo and look at this, because it's so important to the travel from Egypt to the rest of the rest of the world to Egypt. And it's so important to the life of Jesus because he grew up in Nazareth here. And I'll say more about that in a minute. I want to say it right now, but I'll say it in a moment. So here's the Nazareth Ridge in our satellite imagery. Here's the Nazareth Ridge. There's Mount Tabor, the rounded mountain. Here's the hill of Moreh. We're kind of flying right near the Nazareth Ridge. And here comes our road from Megiddo, north of the hill of Moreh, south of Tabor, turning north once you get around Tabor, turning north and heading up to the Sea of Galilee. Makes sense to everybody? So important to understand that. Let's go up on the Nazareth Ridge. Here's the modern city of Nazareth. Nazareth today is I would call it a Christian Arab, an Israeli Arab city. The Arabs in Nazareth, many of them, I mean, it's kind of a Christian nation in the city in the sense that America was a Christian nation. In other words, that's their heritage. I'm not saying they're all Christians, but there are many professing religious Christian Arabs who live here. They are Israeli citizens. They're not mad at Israel. They're not fighting Israel. They're not blowing up Israel. A lot of the bus drivers for tours are from Nazareth. So this is like an Arab Christian Israeli city where, of course, Jesus, this is his hometown. And we're looking at this huge, sprawling city of Nazareth. We're up on the Nazareth Ridge. We're on the edge of it, and we're looking there at Mount Tabor. You see how it's kind of connected to the Nazareth Ridge on the north side, but it's broken off of the Nazareth Ridge, very rounded. Here's Deborah and Barak up on the top of this thing, staging their battle to fight Jabin, king of Hatzor, down here in the valley. We're standing on the Nazareth Ridge. Let's turn a little bit to the right. Well, let's first focus on Mount Tabor. Sorry, now we're down on the mountain, on the Esdraelon floor of the valley, looking at Mount Tabor. I wanted you to get an idea of what it looked like from the floor of the valley. Now we're doing an aerial view over Mount Tabor. There's the Nazareth Ridge. Behind us, here's the top of Mount Tabor. Never been up there. There's a monastery celebrating Deborah and Barak and so forth. Now we are on Mount Tabor. Not my picture, obviously. We're on Mount Tabor looking at the hill of Moreh. I want you to notice, first of all, this dark soil, beautiful Esdraelon Valley, rich soil, crops being grown and so forth. Here's the hill of Moreh. Here's the road, as it were. There's a car down here coming from Megiddo. Around Mount Tabor, where we are, between the hill of Moreh and Tabor, coming from Megiddo, it's going to go around Tabor and turn north and head to the Sea of Galilee. We are actually now on the Nazareth Ridge. We're looking down at Mount Tabor from the Nazareth Ridge. If we turn to the right a little bit, we'd be looking down at the hill of Moreh, but we're up on this high cliff where they were going to throw Jesus off of here, right? See these 2, 3-story, 4-story houses down here at the bottom. It's a very high ridge. You have to go up switchbacks to get to Nazareth from the Valley of Jezreel. It's a high ridge. And the reason I wanted to come back here and talk about this and think about this, because the first time I ever was here on probably my first trip ever to Israel, we went to Nazareth, we went out to the ridge and looked down. We talked about Jesus being thrown off, but here's what went through my head. Jesus grew up in Nazareth as a young boy. Well, they went to Egypt for a while, but when Herod died, they came back to Nazareth. Jesus grew up in Nazareth. And like kids do, they know their neighborhood. They wander around, they play on all the hills and everything. I have no doubt in my mind that Jesus stood on this ridge and looked down into this beautiful valley. And this is the valley of, we call it Esdraelon and Jezreel, but it's also called the Valley of Megiddo. Megiddo. Jesus is living on and looking down into the Valley of Megiddo as a child. Sorry, it chokes me up. How much did he know? We don't know how much he knew. But someday Jesus is going to come fight the nations of the world in this valley, and he grew up as a kid looking down at this. It's so amazing to me to think about that. I don't know at that point in his life if he knew that. But it sends shivers down your spine, right? I think by the time he was an adult and he's preaching that he's the Messiah and they're wanting to throw him off of this ridge, I think he probably knew, someday this valley is going to be the final battle. It's just astounding to me to think about. So important. All right. So Mount Tabor, the hill of Moreh, the road coming from Megiddo, all of this is very crucial to understanding the Esdraelon Valley. Let's go to the western end of the Nazareth Ridge, and there's our final pass is there, okay? Our last pass, the Shimron Pass. This pass provides access from the Esdraelon Valley into what's called Western Lower Galilee. So here it is, right here, the Nazareth Ridge, Mount Tabor, and then there's a pass here at the western end of the Nazareth Ridge. This area here this hilly area is called Western Lower Galilee. We're going to look at Galilee tomorrow. So this is called Western Lower Galilee, and the Shimron Pass, if you live in Galilee, if tomorrow's Galilee study is where you live, it's where you work, it's this is your world, then the way you get to your world is probably, here's the international highway, but you're going to turn off of it if you're heading north, and you're going to go through the Shimron Pass to get up into your world. So the Shimron Pass is access from the Esdraelon Valley, where everybody in the world literally is, up into your neck of the woods, which is Galilee. That's the Shimron Pass at the western end of the Nazareth Ridge, between the Nazareth Ridge and the lower hills of Galilee. Here's our satellite imagery. This is the Nazareth Ridge. There's the Sea of Galilee. So here's the Nazareth Ridge. Here's Mount Tabor. Here's the hill of Moreh. At the western end of the Nazareth Ridge these are the low hills of Lower Galilee, and right between the Nazareth Ridge and the hills of Lower Galilee is the Shimron Pass. And the reason I'm making a big deal out of it now is because tomorrow that will be important to us. There's the Nazareth Ridge, the hills, the Lower Galilee, and there's the Shimron Pass. There's a road through it today. Here it is on our Megiddo map. Here's the Shimron Pass leading into Galilee. It's on the western end of the Nazareth Ridge, east of the Lower Galilee hills. There's a nice path into the region of Galilee from the Esdraelon Valley. By the way, here's a good map of the Nazareth Ridge, the road coming from Megiddo across the valley, between the hill of Moreh, around Mount Tabor, heading north, the Sea of Galilee, and the rest of the world. All right. Cities of the plain. What about the cities down on the valley floor? The four we want to look at are all situated around the hill of Moreh. That's why the hill of Moreh was important a moment ago. 4 towns on the valley floor, all situated around the hill of Moreh, that played an important part of biblical history. The hill of Moreh itself is a smaller oblong hill, about 1,700 feet in elevation, rising out of the valley floor just south of Mount Tabor. We saw it there, right? And north of Mount Gilboa, north of Jezreel. So it's kind of out in the middle of the eastern end of the valley. Its somewhat central location made it strategically important to the Midianites who fought against Gideon. Where was Gideon and his army? On Mount Gilboa. Guess where the Midianites are? They are on the hill of Moreh. And the Philistines who fought against Saul. Where was Saul? He was on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines are on the hill of Moreh. So both of those battles, Gideon, when he culled his men down at the spring and he got them down to 300 and they surrounded the Midianites with their pitchers and their torches and the sword of Gideon, that happened right here at the hill of Moreh. The Midianites are on the hill of Moreh facing Mount Gilboa. Saul's last battle, when he died, the Philistines are over there in the same place on the hill of Moreh. And Saul and the Philistines come down and fight, and Saul is killed up on actually Mount Gilboa as he's fleeing. He's killed, he kills himself essentially. All of that is tied to Mount Gilboa and the hill of Moreh. So we want to get a grasp of that in our heads. Here's the hill of Moreh, and here are our 4 towns. Let's think of this like a clock again. We're going to start at 9 o'clock. I don't know why I always start at 9 o'clock, but we're going to start with Ophrah on the western end of the hill of Moreh, Shunem on the southern side, Endor on the northeastern end, and Nain on the northern side. Ophrah, Shunem, Endor, Nain. Let's talk about those 4 cities tied to the hill of Moreh. Ophrah, Shunem, Endor, and Nain. Those names should ring a bell to you in your Bible knowledge. We've all heard those names before. Let's put them on our map. Here's the hill of Moreh. I put a pin on the highest point there. Here's Mount Tabor. Here's the Nazareth Ridge. So our road coming from Megiddo between the hill of Moreh, Mount Tabor, onto the Sea of Galilee. We want to get a grab of the hill of Moreh and these 4 towns, Ophrah, Shunem, Endor, and Nain. Ophrah. Question mark, because nobody knows exactly if this is where Ophrah is. There's debate on the location of Ophrah. I'm saying this is where it is. This is where we're going to put it. There you go. Although debated, Ophrah of Manasseh may have been situated at the western end of the hill of Moreh. This is where the main north-south road from Megiddo to Tabor Pass intersected the road that turned east to Beth-Shan. Maybe we'll talk about that again. But Ophrah was the hometown of Gideon. So the whole Gideon story, right? When he's threshing his wheat in the wine press instead of the threshing floor because the Midianites, are a problem, and he puts the fleece out and all that stuff. And his dad's mad at him and all that. That's all happening here at Ophrah. Okay, Gideon. Put Gideon there in your mind as his hometown, Judges 6, Judges 8, and all of that. Here's Ophrah at the western end of the hill of Moreh. Here's our satellite view. There's the hill of Moreh, and here's Ophrah at the western end. All right. From Megiddo, forgive me for jumping back to Megiddo all the time, but you really want the big picture. So we're standing at Megiddo. Remember, this is I should give you a quiz. What's this? Nazareth Ridge. You're listening. What's this? Surrounded Mount Tabor. Here's the hill of Moreh. Mount Gilboa. Wonderful. Man, I wish my students were that way. Anyway, and if you look at the hill of Moreh, you see a white city right there in front of us. That is Ophrah. So you can see it from Megiddo. We're standing at Jezreel now. So we're looking north across at the hill of Moreh, and here's a white city on the western end. That is Ophrah. That's what we're calling Ophrah, right? From Jezreel. Let's go to Shunem. So think of Ophrah with regard to Gideon. Let's go to Shunem. Shunem is situated on the south side of the hill of Moreh across the valley from Jezreel. So we just saw it in the last picture, but I'll show it to you in a moment. Here's the hill of Moreh, and there is Shunem on the south side. Jezreel is right here. Okay. Here is our satellite view, the hill of Moreh. There's Ophrah, and here is Shunem, a modern little village that's, I believe, still called Shunem. Jezreel is right beneath us. All right, there's Shunem. We're standing on Jezreel. We saw Ophrah here on the western end. This little village here, which looks like it's part of Ophrah maybe, but it's actually on the south side of the mountain. This is called Shunem. I believe even today, if I remember right, this is called Shunem, looking from Jezreel to the hill of Moreh. We're driving on the road over here into Shunem, as it were. So you see the little village of Shunem, and you see the hill of Moreh. By the way, Shunem, what happened? Who are we thinking of? The Shunammite woman? Shunammite woman. What happened to her? Well, let's look at it. Well, before we get to that, let's do Gideon and the Midianites, and let's do Saul and the Philistines, right? Gideon on Mount Gilboa, Midianites on the hill of Moreh. Saul on Mount Gilboa, Philistines on the hill of Moreh. Let's do that. The Midianites set themselves in array against Gideon near Shunem, Judges 7. Then Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all the people who were with him arose early and encamped beside the spring of Harod, Ein Harod. And the camp of Midian was north of them by the hill of Moreh in the valley. So here's Mount Gilboa. Ein Harod is right down here. You see this pool of water in our satellite image? They actually made a swimming pool in the park down there that captures the spring water from Ein Harod. There's a little park there with a swimming pool. So here's Ein Harod, here's Mount Gilboa, here's the hill of Moreh, and here's Shunem. All right, so Gideon is by Ein Harod, probably kind of up on the mountain, and the Midianites are over there on the valley floor on the south side of the hill of Moreh. They're very near Shunem, right? There are the Midianites, and we are Gideon on Mount Gilboa, looking at the Midianites across the way. The Philistines, later, much later, another battle. The Philistines set themselves in array near Shunem in their battle against Saul. The Philistines assembled and came and encamped at Shunem. Saul gathered all Israel, and they encamped at Gilboa. Now we know where this is. This is a mirror image of Gideon and the Midianites. Saul and the Philistines. When Saul saw the army of the Philistines, he was afraid, his heart trembled, and so forth. So now, Mount Gilboa, now this is the Philistines over by Shunem. And Saul is here on Gilboa, exactly like Gideon and the Midianites. All right, more about Shunem. We'll come back to that battle, by the way. Elisha lodged at Shunem with a couple who built him a prophet's chamber. We still talk about that stuff, right? Does your church have a prophet's chamber? I mean, a lot of churches have what they call a prophet's chamber. We've got a little apartment in our building where, missionaries and others can come and stay. It's common. And when I grew up hearing about prophet's chambers, right? Anyway, the Shunamites, this couple built a prophet's chamber for Elisha, and their only son died. Elisha raised him from the dead. Right? One day Elisha went to Shunem, where a wealthy woman lived, urged him to eat some food. Whenever you pass that way, he'd stop there. By the way, I tell people this, anybody who ever came to Newton, Kansas to preach in our church, missionaries, preachers, they always stayed at, guess where? The Beacham house. My mom was from Mobile, Southern hospitality. Everybody stayed there, which for me as a child was really neat because I got to meet and know a lot of people. I could tell a lot of stories, but I can't right now. Anyway. So these were those people, and Elisha came so often he'd stay there, and they built a room for him right there at Shunem. let's talk about Endor. We're going to come back to that story. Well, in a way, we will come back to that story. But remember, their son died. Elisha wasn't there. And they sent word to Elisha. It's like, why? This is our only child. Why would God allow this to happen? And Elisha comes back and lays on the child, and the child comes back to life. Raises him from the dead through the power of God. All right, Endor. That's our next city. Endor is a small village on the northeast side of the hill of Moreh. So now we're at 3 o'clock, right? We started at Ophrah, Shunem, now Endor on the northeastern side of the hill of Moreh. Here's the hill of Moreh, Ophrah, Shunem, hill of Moreh. There's Endor. There's Endor on the northeastern side. So we're looking at Jezreel. We're in Jezreel again. There's Ophrah, here's Shunem. Endor, we can't see it from here. It's over on the other side of the hill, the northern eastern side is Endor. But I show you this picture because in a minute that will become important. We're looking at Endor now from the northeast. There's Jezreel. We're just standing there looking this way. Let's look at the other side of the hill of Moreh. There's Ophrah. There's Shunem. Now here's Endor at the northeastern end. Okay, then we're going to go to Nain eventually. But right now we're thinking about Endor. Why Endor? Why are we talking about Endor? Saul consulted a witch from Endor. He's on Gilboa, right? The Philistines are down there at Shunem. And he wants to know from God, he's the king of Israel, the king of, the united monarchies, the king, and he wants to know from God if he should fight this battle against the Philistines. And because Saul lived such a godless life, God won't answer him. By Urim, by Thummim, by prophet, God won't answer him. And so he has to know whether he should fight this battle, and so he goes to consult a witch, which was against his own law. You know the story. The Philistines assembled and encamped at Shunem. Saul encamped at Gilboa. When Saul saw the army of the Philistines afraid, inquired of the Lord. The Lord would not answer him by dreams, Urim prophets. Saul said to his servant, seek out for me a woman who's a medium, a witch, a consulter of, spirits, that I may go to her and inquire of her. And his servant said to him, behold, there's a medium at Endor. So he disguised himself and put on other garments and went, and that he and the two men with him, they came to the woman by night. Why by night? To get to Endor from Mount Gilboa, he had to go around the Philistine army. He's so desperate to know what God wants him to do that he has to endanger himself and go around the Philistine army to the backside of the mountain to talk to this witch. Here he is at Gilboa. There are the Philistines, and Endor's back behind there. I've got to get over there and talk to this woman, and you know the rest of the story. Samuel did appear, much to the chagrin of the media. It was like, whoa, this really happened. And, of course, Saul lost his life. But I just want you to see the proximity of those places. Consulting the witch of Endor is bad enough, but that he was so desperate that he had to cross over, essentially, the Philistine lines to get there is absolutely astounding to me. Okay, our last city, our last story, our last event, but you're going to love this. I love this. Nain. Okay, we know Nain from the New Testament. Nain is on the northern side of the hill of Moreh, a small little New Testament town. All these cities didn't exist at the same time. They weren't all important at the same time. Nain had nothing to do with Shunem and Endor and Ophrah. This is a New Testament town. Okay. It's on the north side of the hill of Moreh. Here's the hill of Moreh, Ophrah, Shunem, Endor. Here's Nain, right on the north side. There's Mount Tabor right here. Here's the Via Maris. All the nations of the world traveling from the Sea of Galilee, past Nazareth, Megiddo to the rest of the world. And there's little Nain tucked away on the north side of the hill of Moreh. We're looking from Mount Tabor now, so we're looking at the north side. We saw this picture before. We're looking at the north side of the hill of Moreh. What I didn't tell you when we looked at this before is there's the little village of Nain on the north side. So remember, here comes our road from Megiddo between Tabor and Moreh and on to Galilee and so forth. So everybody's traveling here, including a guy who's going back and forth from Galilee to Nazareth to Judah. His name is Jesus. All right, there's Nain. Here's an aerial view of Ophrah, Shunem, Endor. There's Nain on the north side. Here's the road, as it were, coming from Megiddo, heading up to, and here comes Jesus walking down the road from Galilee to wherever he's going. And as Jesus passed the town of Nain, he encountered a funeral procession. And what he did was proceed to raise from the dead the only son of a broken-hearted woman. Does that sound familiar? The Shunammite. Where is Shunem? Sorry, this gets to me when I think about it. Shunem's on the other side of the hill. Elisha raised the Shunammite's dead only son, and now Jesus raises the only son of this poor woman from Nain. The very other side of the hill. 850 years later, from Elisha raising this Shunammite. There's Nain, Shunem on the other side, and the sons of these poor, broken-hearted women raised by Elisha and Jesus. How did the people of Nain respond when Jesus raised this son from the dead? Fear came upon them all. They glorified God, saying, "A great prophet has risen up among us." What was Elisha? A great prophet. They knew this history. Right across the mountain, a great prophet raised up the Shunammite son, and this Jesus guy comes walking by. Forgive me for being crass, but they didn't know who he was. They knew his claims, probably heard of him, and he raises this poor woman's son. And they say, a great prophet has risen up among us. Fear came upon them. God has visited his people, and this report spread throughout all Judea and the surrounding region. Folks, geography anticipates history. Jesus knew this. God the Father knew this. God wanted this woman's son to die so that the funeral would happen when Jesus passes by and he can raise that poor woman's only son from the dead right across the hill from where Elisha did the same thing. And God the Father did that to glorify his son Jesus and to show the world that a great prophet has come. In fact, the greatest prophet, the greatest priest, the greatest king of all time, Jesus of Nazareth, the Messiah, has come. Luke 7. And that's Esdraelon. Okay, the Kishon Pass, Jokneam Pass, Megiddo Pass, Taanach Pass, Dothan Pass, Harod Pass, Tabor Pass, the Via Maris, Shimron Pass. That's it.